They ridiculed Earth at the Council. Humanity terminated every treaty overnight. Part 5. The New Order. 1 month after the severance, the Galactic Assembly reconvened, but this time, everything was different. The hall looked the same white metal walls, the same glass ceiling showing distant stars, the same curved rows of seats rising high above the central platform. But the atmosphere had changed completely. There was no casual conversation, no relaxed laughter, no confident voices filling the air before the session began. The delegates sat quietly in their seats, and many of them kept glancing toward the entrance of the human delegation's corridor, as if they were waiting for something they were not sure they wanted to see. The hall was full, but it felt empty. Something invisible had been removed from the room, and it took a moment to understand what it was. The easy, comfortable arrogance that had filled this hall for centuries had been drained out of it like water from a broken glass. Yun Do-hwan walked in at exactly the scheduled time. He wore the same formal suit he had worn a month ago, the same calm expression, the same steady posture. Nothing about him had changed on the outside, but every delegate in the room could feel that something had changed on the inside. He moved differently now, not with aggression or pride, but with the quiet certainty of a man who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Baek Somi walked beside him, her tablet in her hand as always. Behind them came a small team of human diplomats, each one carefully selected by Somi for their ability to stay calm under pressure and say very little while meaning very much. Do-hwan stepped onto the central platform. The lights dimmed, the chime rang, 10,000 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. He did not speak immediately. He stood there for a long moment, looking up at the rows of delegates the same way he had looked at them a month ago. The same faces, the same species. But now those faces wore very different expressions. The Velhari delegate sat in his usual place, in the upper rows. His silver skin looked duller than before, and his forearms were folded tightly across his chest. He did not meet Do-hwan's eyes. The Andari delegate sat nearby, his round body rigid in his seat. The deep-set eyes that had once shown contempt now showed something closer to exhaustion. His species had lost 2 engineers, 7 jump gates, and a significant portion of their interstellar trade network. He looked like a man he had not slept well in a very long time. Do-hwan let the silence hold for 10 seconds, then 20. The hall was so quiet that some delegates could hear the soft hum of the station's air systems. 1 month ago, Do-hwan began, I stood on this platform and asked for respect. You gave me laughter. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Every ear in the hall was straining to hear him. I will not ask again. He paused. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Earth did not come here today to punish you. We did not build our fleet to threaten you. We did not withdraw from your treaties to watch you suffer. He looked around the room slowly. We did all of this because you left us no other choice. For 40 years, we played by your rules. We were patient, we were helpful, we were kind, and in return, you called us insects. You called us livestock. You laughed at us in the one place where every species is supposed to be equal. The Velhari delegate's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That era is over, Do-hwan said. Earth will rejoin galactic society, but not as a guest, not as a servant, not as a developing species grateful for your attention. We will rejoin as architects. We will help design the systems that govern this galaxy, and we will have an equal voice in every decision that affects our people. He turned to Somi and gave a small nod. Somi stepped forward, opened her tablet, and with a few taps, sent a document to every delegate's screen in the hall. This is the new Charter of Cooperation, Do-hwan continued. It was written by our team over the past 4 weeks. It replaces every treaty that was terminated. It establishes new terms for trade, defense, navigation, and cultural exchange, terms that are fair to every species, including humanity. Delegates began reading the document on their screens. Some of them scrolled quickly, their eyes widening as they took in the details. Others read slowly, carefully, as if looking for traps. The charter was remarkably fair. That was perhaps the most surprising thing about it. Earth could have demanded anything. Exclusive trade rights, military dominance, permanent control of the Jumpgate network. They had the leverage to take whatever they wanted. Instead, the charter proposed genuine equality. Every species would have a permanent seat on a restructured inner council. Trade would be balanced, with fair pricing and mutual benefit. Jump gates would be maintained by a shared team of engineers from multiple species, with humans training others, so that no single species would be relied upon too heavily. Military forces would remain independent, but a new mutual defense agreement would protect smaller species from exploitation. It was, by any measure, a generous document, and that generosity carried its own kind of weight. It showed the galaxy that Earth was not interested in revenge. Earth was interested in something much harder to argue against: fairness. She was small, even by the standards of her species, and her voice was thin, but it carried clearly through the silent hall. Earth sent us food when we were hungry, she said simply, even after what happened here, even when they had every reason not to. She looked at Dohan. My people will sign this charter, today. A murmur went through the hall. Then another delegate stood, a representative of one of the smaller species that had quietly observed the crisis from the sidelines. We will sign as well, he said. Then another, and another. One by one, species rose to announce their agreement. The smaller ones first, then the mid-sized powers, then the larger ones who had enough sense to see which way the wind was blowing. Each announcement was met with quiet nods from the human delegation. The Andari delegate was among the last to stand. He looked at Dohan for a long moment, his deep-set eyes unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice rough and tired. We will sign, he said. Nothing more. He sat back down and stared at the floor. Finally, only the Velhari delegate remained. The hall went silent again. Everyone watched the silver-skinned figure in the upper rows, waiting. He stood slowly, his 4 arms unfolded. He looked down at Dohan on the platform below, and for a moment it seemed like he might speak. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He looked at the charter on his screen one more time. Then he pressed his thumb to the signature panel without saying a word. It was done. No Unji, watching from the communications center on Earth, allowed herself a second cup of coffee. This time, it was hot. President Jiwoo watched from her office and said nothing. She simply turned off her screen and sat in the quiet for a while, allowing herself to feel something she had not felt in a month. Not victory exactly. Something more like relief. The kind of relief you feel when a long, painful journey finally reaches its end, and you realize you are still standing. In the assembly hall, Dohan stepped off the platform. Somi fell into step beside him, just as she had a month ago. They walked back through the same white corridor, their footsteps echoing against the same polished floor. But this time, there was no laughter behind them. Only silence, and the soft sound of a galaxy beginning to rearrange itself around a new understanding. As they reached the shuttle, Dohan stopped. He stood in the same spot where he had stood a month ago, looking out at the stars through the corridor window. They will never forget, he said quietly. Somi stood beside him, her tablet tucked under her arm. She looked at the stars too. The same stars that had watched humanity crawl out of its caves, build its cities, reach for the sky, cross the void, and stand in a room full of ancient species without flinching. That was the point, she said. They boarded their shuttle and went home. Behind them, the Galactic Assembly Hall, the largest structure ever built by any living species, hung in the dark of space, full of delegates who were only now beginning to understand something that humanity had known all along. Respect is not given, it is not requested, it is not earned through obedience or patience or kindness. It is built, quietly, carefully, over decades, and when the time comes, it is revealed, not as a gift, but as a fact. And facts, unlike laughter, do not fade. H1. They ridiculed Earth at the Council. Humanity terminated every treaty overnight. H2. Part 4. The Reckoning. 2 weeks after the severance, the galaxy was falling apart. It did not happen all at once. It happened in pieces, like a building losing its bricks one by one, until the whole structure began to lean and groan. First the food shortages, then the transportation failures, then the quiet, creeping realization that Earth had been holding far more together than anyone had ever bothered to notice. The Velhari were the first to truly suffer. Their homeworld was beautiful. Tall crystal cities, rivers of silver water, skies that glowed pink at sunset. But it was not a world built for farming. The Velhari had moved beyond agriculture thousands of years ago, choosing instead to import food from species they considered beneath them. For the past 2 decades, most of that food had come from Earth. Now the warehouses were emptying. Rationing had begun in the outer districts. The Velhari government tried to restart its ancient farming systems, but the machines were rusted, the knowledge was lost, and the soil had not been worked in centuries. They reached out to other species for help, but those species had their own problems. The Andari were dealing with the jump gate crisis. 7 major gates had now gone offline. Their own engineers tried to repair them, but the technology was tricky and unforgiving. Human engineers had made it look easy, crawling inside the massive machines with their tools and their strange ability to understand broken things. The Andari engineers did not have that ability. 2 of them died when a gate reactor overloaded during a failed repair attempt. After that, the Andari stopped trying. Interstellar trade slowed to almost nothing. Ships that once crossed the galaxy in hours now took weeks, following old sublight routes that had not been used in generations. Goods rotted in cargo holds. Medicine expired before it reached the sick. The galaxy, which had built itself around speed and connection, suddenly felt very large and very cold. And then the fleet appeared. Quan Taysun had waited patiently. He was a man who understood timing the way a musician understands rhythm, not just when to act, but when to pause, when to let silence do the work. He had watched the galaxy stumble and struggle for 2 weeks, and he had judged that the moment was right. The ships came out of hiding all at once, across 12 star systems. 3,000 warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything the galaxy had seen from Earth before. They emerged from behind gas giants, rose out of asteroid fields, and drifted out of dead moons where they had been sleeping for decades. Their hulls were dark gray, almost black, and they moved with a quiet smoothness that made them look less like machines and more like living things. They did not fire a single shot. They did not need to. Instead, they positioned themselves at every major strategic point in the galaxy: jump gate exits, trade route intersections, resource-rich asteroid belts, and the approaches to every major homeworld. They sat there, engines humming, weapons powered but silent, and they waited. The message was clear without any words. Earth was not hiding anymore. Earth was not asking anymore. Earth was showing the galaxy exactly what it had been building in the dark for 40 years. Alien military commanders ran the numbers and did not like what they found. Earth's hidden fleet was not just large, it was advanced. The weapons systems were unfamiliar. The shield technology was unknown, and the ships moved with a speed and coordination that suggested a level of military planning that went far beyond what anyone had expected from a developing species. Some species considered fighting. The Velhari still had a powerful navy, and their pride demanded a response. But their admirals looked at the human ships parked calmly outside their system and calculated the odds. The odds were not good, not because the humans would definitely win, but because no one knew what those dark ships could do. And uncertainty in war is more dangerous than any weapon. Back on Earth, Baek Somi had been promoted. She was no longer Do Hwan's aide. She was now the chief diplomatic officer of Earth's newly independent government, answering directly to President Jiwoo. Her first task was simple: manage the flood of desperate communications coming in from every corner of the galaxy. The calls came day and night. Some were angry. The Velhari delegate who had laughed at Do Hwan now screamed into his communicator, demanding that Earth stand down its fleet and restore food shipments. Somi listened to his entire rant with a blank expression, then disconnected the call without responding. Some were pleading. The Mirelli, the small species on the cold moon, sent a delegation of 3 ambassadors to the edge of human space. They waited there in a tiny ship for 4 days, broadcasting a message on repeat, asking for food. Just food. Nothing else. Somi read their messages every morning. On the 5th day, she forwarded their request to President Jiwoo with a personal note suggesting that the Mirelli had never participated in the mockery at the assembly. Jiwoo approved a limited food shipment, the only exception made during the entire crisis. Some calls were curious. A few smaller species, ones that had always been quiet at the assembly, reached out not with demands, but with questions. They wanted to know how Earth had done it. How a species that everyone had dismissed as primitive and short-lived had built a secret empire right under the galaxy's nose. Somi gave them all the same answer. We listened, we learned, and we prepared. The Andari sent a formal apology. It was written in careful diplomatic language, full of regret and promises of future respect. Somi read it twice, then filed it away without responding. An apology written out of hunger was not the same as an apology written out of understanding, and she knew the difference. Do Hwan, meanwhile, stayed quiet. He remained on Earth, far from the assembly, far from the alien delegates and their desperate messages. He spent his days in a small office, reviewing reports from the fleet, reading intelligence updates, and drinking tea that he made himself, because he did not trust anyone else to make it properly. One evening, Somi came to his office with a stack of files. She sat across from him and placed them on his desk. 17 species have now formally requested negotiations, she said. 5 of them are inner council members. Do Hwan sipped his tea. What are they offering? Everything. Permanent seats, full voting rights, technology sharing, formal apologies. Some of them are offering things we never even asked for. Do Hwan set down his cup. He looked at the files for a long moment, then looked at Somi. Do you remember what the Andari delegate called us? He asked. Somi's expression did not change. Short-lived insects. Yes. Do Hwan nodded slowly. I want them to remember that too. I want them to remember it every time they sit across from a human at a negotiating table. I want them to remember it for 1,000 years. He pushed the files back across the desk. Tell them we will talk. But not yet. Let them wait a little longer. Let them feel what it is like to be ignored. Somi took the files and stood. At the door, she paused. The Velhari ambassador tried to call you directly today. He asked to speak with you personally. Do Hwan picked up his tea again. What did you tell him? Somi allowed herself a very small smile. I let it ring. They ridiculed Earth at the Council. Humanity terminated every treaty overnight. Part 3. The Severance. No Unji had not slept in 36 hours. She sat in the communication center deep beneath the Blue House, surrounded by screens that showed feeds from every major alien news network, diplomatic channel, and military frequency that Earth had access to. Her team of 40 operators worked quietly around her, each one monitoring a different section of the galaxy's information flow. Unji was a small woman with short hair and dark circles under her eyes that had been there long before this crisis started. She was the head of Earth's communications division, which was a polite way of saying she controlled what the galaxy heard from humanity, and more importantly, what it did not hear. She had held this position for 9 years, and in that time she had crafted careful, polite messages designed to make Earth seem friendly, cooperative, and harmless. She was very tired of writing polite messages. The order from President Han Ji-woo had been simple and clear. Prepare a simultaneous broadcast to every species in the Galactic Assembly. Not a request, not a negotiation, a statement. Unji had written it in 20 minutes. It was the shortest thing she had ever drafted, and she considered it her finest work. Now she sat waiting for the signal. At exactly midnight Galactic Standard Time, her phone buzzed. One word from the president. Now. Unji typed a command into her console. Across the galaxy, on every diplomatic channel, every emergency frequency, and every public broadcast system that Earth had access to, the same message appeared. It was text only, no video, no audio, no decoration, just words on a screen. To all member species of the Galactic Assembly. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from all treaties, agreements, and cooperative arrangements currently held with any galactic entity. This includes, but is not limited to, all trade agreements, defense pacts, navigation rights, resource-sharing contracts, technology exchanges, and cultural programs. The total number of terminated agreements is 1,247. Earth's borders are now closed. No alien vessel will be permitted to enter human-controlled space without explicit authorization. No human goods, services, or personnel will be provided to any alien world. This decision is final and not subject to negotiation. You wanted Earth alone. You have it. Yunji leaned back in her chair and watched her screens. For about 90 seconds, nothing happened. The galaxy was quiet. Then everything exploded at once. The Velhari diplomatic channel lit up with frantic messages demanding clarification. The Andari Trade Commission sent 17 urgent requests in the space of 2 minutes. Smaller species, ones that depended heavily on human exports, began broadcasting distress signals almost immediately. Yunji's operators looked at her, waiting for instructions. "Do not respond to anything," she said calmly. "Let them talk to empty air." The scale of what Earth had just done would take the galaxy days to fully understand, but the first shocks were already visible. Human cargo ships carrying food, medicine, and manufactured goods to dozens of alien worlds received orders to turn around immediately. Every single one obeyed. Within hours, shipping lanes that had been busy for decades went dark and silent. On the planet Velhar, the silver-skinned species that had mocked Dowan so openly discovered that 30% of their food supply came from Earth. They had never thought about this before. It had never seemed important. Humans grew food cheaply and in massive quantities, and the Velhari had been happy to buy it, rather than waste their own resources on farming. Now, overnight, that food was gone. The Andari faced a different problem. Their entire interstellar transportation network ran on jump gates, enormous machines that created shortcuts through space, allowing ships to cross vast distances in seconds. These gates were incredibly complex and broke down often. For the past 20 years, human engineers had maintained most of them, because humans were unusually good at fixing things and charged very little for their work. Now, every human engineer at every jump gate station in the galaxy packed their tools and left without a word. Within 48 hours, 3 major jump gates went offline due to maintenance failures. Travel between star systems slowed to a crawl. Species that had been hours apart were suddenly weeks apart. Smaller worlds panicked the fastest. A species called the Myrelli, who lived on a cold moon with poor soil, had depended entirely on human grain shipments. Their representative sent a personal message to Yunji, begging for an exception. Yunji read it, felt a small pain in her chest, and deleted it. She did not enjoy this, but she had her orders. Back in the assembly hall, emergency sessions were called. Delegates who had laughed just days ago now stood at the same podium with fear in their voices. The Velhari delegate, the same one who had mocked humanity's short history, demanded that Earth be forced to honor its treaties. But there was a problem with that demand. Earth had not broken any law. Every treaty contained a withdrawal clause, and Earth had followed every clause to the letter. The paperwork was perfect. Doan and Somi had made sure of that years ago, long before any of this happened. Some delegates began to suspect that this had been planned, that Earth had always known this day might come, and had prepared for it carefully, quietly, while smiling and serving food. They were right. On Earth, the public reaction was not celebration, it was grim satisfaction. People did not dance in the streets or wave flags. They simply nodded, as if something that should have happened long ago had finally happened. The burning feeling in their chests had not gone away, but it had changed shape. It was no longer just anger. It was purpose. President Jiwoo addressed the planet in a short broadcast. She stood in front of a plain background, wearing a simple dark suit, and spoke for less than 3 minutes. For 40 years, we gave the galaxy our best, she said. Our food, our engineers, our trust. In return, we were called insects. We were called animals. We were laughed at in a hall that we helped build. She paused. That arrangement is over. From this moment, Earth works for Earth. We will not ask for permission. We will not beg for respect. We will build our own future, on our own terms, with our own hands. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Across the galaxy, alien leaders watched her broadcast and felt something they had never felt when looking at a human before. They could not quite name it, but it sat heavy in their stomachs and made it difficult to sleep. It was the beginning of fear. In the communications center, Yunji finally allowed herself a cup of coffee. Her screens were still flooded with incoming messages from dozens of species. Pleas, threats, demands, offers. She ignored all of them. One of her operators looked up from the station. "Ma'am, the Velhari ambassador is requesting a direct call with President Jiwoo. He says it's extremely urgent." Unji took a sip of her coffee. It was bitter and not hot enough, but she drank it anyway. "Tell him the president is busy," she said. "Tell him she will be busy for a very long time." They ridiculed Earth at the council. Humanity terminated every treaty overnight. Part 2. The Quiet Fury. The footage reached Earth in less than 2 hours. It played on every news channel, every social media platform, every public screen in every city on the planet. People watched it on their phones during lunch. They watched it on large displays in town squares. They watched it in silence, in groups, alone in their rooms at night, with the lights off. Nobody needed to explain what had happened. The images were clear enough. Their ambassador, standing tall and dignified, asking for what Earth had earned. And then the laughter. The comparison to animals. 8 billion people watched, and 8 billion people felt the same thing. A slow, burning feeling that started in the stomach and spread outward through the body, like heat from a fire. President Han Jiwoo watched the footage in her office in the Blue House, the seat of Earth's unified government. She sat behind her desk with her hands folded in front of her back straight, her face completely still. She watched the entire recording from beginning to end without saying a word. Her chief of staff stood near the door, waiting. 2 senior advisors sat on the couch to the left, both of them visibly upset, One of them had red eyes, as if he had been trying very hard not to cry. When the footage ended, Jiwoo pressed a button on her desk and the screen went dark. The room was quiet for a long time. "Get me Kwon Tae-sun," she said. Her voice was soft. It was always soft. That was what made people nervous. Kwon Tae-sun arrived within the hour. He was the head of Earth's Defense Council, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of stone. He carried a thick black case under one arm and walked into the president's office without knocking. Jiwoo looked up at him. "Sit down." He sat. He placed the black case on the desk between them and opened it. Inside were files, not digital files, but actual paper documents, printed on heavy stock and sealed with red stamps. Some of them were so old that the edges had turned yellow. "Project Long Night," he said. "Project Iron Root. Project Silent Wave. Project Cold Garden." He laid each file on the desk as he spoke. "These have been running since before I was born. Some of them go back to the first decade after we made contact with the galaxy." Jiwoo looked at the files, but did not touch them. "Explain." "When Earth first joined the Galactic Assembly, our founders were not stupid. They smiled and signed treaties and shook hands with alien delegates. But they also asked a simple question. What happens if the galaxy turns against us?" He tapped the first file. Project Long Night, a network of hidden military stations built inside dead moons and asteroid fields across 12 star systems. Fully armed, fully supplied, never activated. He tapped the second. Project Ironroot, independent food production and manufacturing facilities hidden in deep space. If Earth is ever cut off from galactic trade, these facilities can feed and supply our entire population for 50 years. The third file. Project Silent Wave, a communications network that operates outside the galactic standard channels, completely invisible to alien monitoring systems. We have been quietly building it for 30 years. And the fourth. Project Cold Garden, not the small patrol ships we show the assembly. The real fleet. 3,000 warships, built in secret shipyards behind gas giants, where no alien telescope can see. Each one equipped with weapons the galaxy does not know we have. Jiwoo stared at him. The room was very quiet. "You are telling me," she said slowly, "that for 40 years, while we were smiling and serving food and fixing their machines, we were also building all of this?" Tae-sun nodded. Every generation of Earth's leadership has been briefed on these projects. Every one of them chose to keep them hidden. The hope was that we would never need them. He paused. I believe that hope is now dead. Jiwoo stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city was dark. It was late at night, but she could see lights in almost every window. Nobody was sleeping. The whole planet was awake, sitting with that same burning feeling in their chests, waiting to see what their leader would do. She thought about Yoon Do-hwan standing on that platform, alone under the lights, while 10,000 aliens laughed at him. She thought about the Velhari delegate's silver face, twisted with amusement. She thought about the word livestock. "How long to bring everything online?" she asked without turning around. Tae-sun checked his watch out of habit, though the answer had nothing to do with the time. The stations, 6 hours. The fleet, 12 hours. The communications network is already running. It has been running for years. Jiwoo turned back to face him. Her expression had not changed, but something in her eyes was different now. It was the same look Do-hwan had carried on the shuttle. Quiet, steady, and absolutely certain. "Wake everything up," she said. "All of it. All of it." He nodded once, turned, and walked out of the office. Before he reached the door, Jiwoo spoke again. "Tae-sun." He stopped. "Call No Eunji. Tell her to prepare a broadcast. She will know what kind." "Yes, ma'am." He left. Jiwoo stood alone in her office for a moment, looking at the files still spread across her desk. 40 years of smiling, 40 years of patience, 40 years of being the galaxy's quiet, helpful little species that never complained and never demanded anything. That was over now. She picked up her phone and called Do-hwan directly. He answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting. "Ambassador," she said, "how are you?" There was a pause on the other end. "Angry, Madam President. Very angry." "Good," Jiwoo said. "Stay angry, but stay quiet. I need you to do nothing for the next 24 hours. No statements, no responses to the assembly. Nothing." And after 24 hours, Jiwoo looked out the window again. Somewhere out there, across the stars, the Galactic Assembly was probably still laughing, still congratulating itself on putting the humans in their place. After 24 hours, she said, they will not be laughing anymore. She ended the call and sat back down at her desk. Across 12 star systems, hidden inside dead moons and dark asteroid fields, machines that had been sleeping for decades began to hum. Lights flickered on in empty corridors. Engines warmed. Weapons systems ran their first diagnostics in years. The galaxy did not notice. The galaxy was busy laughing. It would not be laughing for much longer. They ridiculed Earth at the Council. Humanity terminated every treaty overnight. Part 1. The Humiliation. The Galactic Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built by any living species. It floated in open space, far from any star. A massive ring of white metal and glass that could hold 10,000 delegates from across the known galaxy. Light from distant stars poured through its transparent ceiling, and the air inside was kept at a temperature comfortable for most species, though never quite right for any of them. Yoon Do-won stood at the entrance of the human delegation's corridor and adjusted his collar. He was a tall man with a calm face and steady hands, the kind of person who never raised his voice, even when he was angry. He had served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 6 years, and in that time he had learned one important truth: the galaxy did not care about Earth. Behind him, Baek Somi walked with a tablet in her hand, reviewing the speech one last time. She was younger than Do-won by almost 15 years, sharp-eyed and careful with every word she wrote. She had drafted this speech over the course of 3 months, rewriting it again and again, until every sentence carried weight. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. Do-won looked at her and gave a small nod. "Ready as we will ever be." They walked together into the main chamber. The hall was already full. Thousands of delegates sat in curved rows that rose high above the central platform, their bodies of every shape and color. Some were tall and thin, with pale blue skin. Others were short and wide, covered in dark plates of natural armor. A few floated in sealed tanks of liquid, their soft bodies drifting gently behind glass. The humans had been part of this assembly for almost 40 years. In that time, they had signed over 1,200 treaties, shared their food and technology, sent engineers to repair alien jump gates, and opened their planet to trade. But despite all of this, Earth held no permanent seat on the Inner Council. Humanity was still listed as a developing species, a label that had not changed since the day they joined. Today, Do-hwan planned to change that. He stepped onto the central platform. The lights above dimmed slightly, and a soft chime rang through the hall, signaling that a delegate wished to speak. Thousands of eyes turned toward him. "Honored delegates," Do-hwan began, his voice steady and clear. "I stand before you as the representative of Earth and its 8 billion people. For 40 years, humanity has contributed to this assembly with loyalty and dedication. We have fed worlds that could not feed themselves. We have built and repaired infrastructure that benefits species who have never visited our planet. We have honored every treaty, every agreement, every promise." He paused and looked around the room. "Today I formally request that Earth be granted equal standing among the allied species of this assembly. We ask for a permanent seat on the Inner Council, and for the removal of the developing species label that no longer reflects what humanity is or what it has done." For a moment, there was silence. Then a sound started somewhere in the upper rows, a low, rumbling noise that Dowan did not recognize at first. It took him a second to realize it was laughter. The Velhari delegate, a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, rose from his seat. His name was long and difficult for human tongues, but the assembly knew him well. He was old, powerful, and had never hidden his feelings about Earth. "The human wants a seat at the table," he said, and his voice carried easily through the hall. "How touching. Tell me, Ambassador, does your species still measure its history in mere thousands of years? My people were building cities when yours were drawing pictures on cave walls." More laughter. It came from different sections now, spreading like a wave. Another delegate stood, an Ondari, round-bodied and heavy, with deep-set eyes that showed no warmth. "Humans are short-lived insects," he said flatly. "They are born, they panic, they build things out of fear, and then they die. What could such a species offer to the Inner Council? A seat for a creature that will be dead before the next assembly session ends." The laughter grew louder. Some delegates did not even bother to hide it. They pointed at Dowan, made gestures he did not understand, and spoke to each other in amused tones. Dowan stood perfectly still. His face did not change, his hands did not shake. But inside his chest, something cold and hard settled into place. Big Somi sat in the human delegation's box, her fingers tight around her tablet. She was recording everything. Every laugh, every insult, every face that showed amusement at humanity's expense. Her jaw was clenched so hard that her teeth hurt, but she did not stop recording. A third delegate spoke, this one from the species Dowan did not even know by name. "Perhaps," the creature said with a thin smile, "Earth should be grateful we allow them in this hall at all. They contribute food and labor. Useful, yes, but so do service animals. Shall we give seats to livestock as well?" The hall erupted. The laughter was deafening now. It bounced off the glass ceiling and the metal walls, and filled the chamber like a living thing. Dawan looked up at the rows of delegates above him. He saw thousands of faces twisted with amusement, thousands of mouths open in mockery. Not one voice rose to defend Earth. Not one species stood up to say that this was wrong. He turned slowly, stepped off the platform, and walked back toward his delegation's corridor. Somi was already on her feet, waiting for him. She fell into step beside him without a word. They walked in silence through the long white hallway. Their footsteps echoed against the polished floor. Behind them, the laughter continued, muffled now by distance but still clearly audible. When they reached their shuttle, Dawan stopped. He stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. "Did you get all of it?" he asked. Somi held up her tablet. "Every second." Dawan nodded slowly. "Good. Send it to every screen, every channel, every device on Earth. Let them see what the galaxy thinks of us." Somi looked at him. His face was still calm, but his eyes had changed. There was something in them she had never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something deeper and quieter and far more dangerous. "Yes, sir," she said. She uploaded the footage before their shuttle even left the station. By the time they reached the jump gate, 8 billion people had already watched it. And 8 billion people had already begun to feel the same cold, hard thing that had settled in Yoon Do-han's chest. The galaxy had laughed at Earth.